evil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3-10. Let's talk about Ukraine. Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. You can also find the show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe to our show. Also give us a review. It helps others find us. I'm doing this today solo, but as always, you can find my partner and better half on the podcast September. You can find her at Twitch and Twitter at 9of12. That's NINEOF12. You can also hear her on the Geek Girls podcast and support her on the Next Top Podcasters. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon site that you can find at patreon.com/heresy and hearsay, where you can visit and help us support our shows. We also have a little extra content and stuff like that on there, or we're adding that right now. Just $2 a month will get you access to that, and it goes a long way to help make this humble show. You can also contribute to bits in Twitch when we're live, or subscribe for free, even if we're not live. You can do that by using Amazon Prime. You can also follow our website, or find our website at Heresy and Hearsay, where you can go there and find and view past shows, as well as bios for myself in September. First things first, before we get really started into all of this, some house cleaning things. I apologize for the mic. I'm having a little problems with my good mic right now. It's the software issue, and I apologize for that. I will get that resolved before Thursday's show is uploaded. At that point, we should be good to go again with the standard mic and everything, so I apologize for that in advance. Again, also, for the next few weeks to a couple of months or so, I will be doing this by myself, as September will be recording and doing the next America's Top Next Podcaster. I can't remember the name of the show, and I'm sorry, September. I apologize. This show is going to be in a different format as well. There's not going to be many health check or mental health check, I should say, or a care or stick or anything like that. It's just going to be going over some brief information of what's been going on as far as Ukraine is concerned. I'm not news. This is an opinion show. But I'm also not going to dive into deep opinions. I'm more going to try to offer encouragement, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Also, Thursday's show will be a discussion of the State of the Union, the first State of the Union with President Biden, and it's going to be very interesting. He got a good deal of his stuff done, but, the Build Back Better didn't happen. Couple other things. He also has a new Supreme Court justice that he's nominated, as well as, of course, the war with Russia and Ukraine. So it's going to be an interesting watch. It comes on tomorrow night. We will definitely go over that on Thursday show. All right. So with that being said, before we get any further, if Brother Bowie could lead us in a word of prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
So, what we're going to do is a brief history of Ukraine as it is in the modern perspective. Ukraine has been a very old country, and it was annexed into the USSR while the USSR was forming, and became basically the USSR, because they did not have. It was like the best way is like a state, like here in the United States, but they didn't have like sovereign countries that were part of the Federation, like what the Russian Federation is currently. So before the invasion on February 24th, there's some history that is probably good to understand and go through. Back in 1991, as the USSR started to come apart, the Ukraine voted to be independent and to become separate from what is now Russia, and have their own independence. I remember, so some of this is going to have some peppered stories because I'm old enough to remember a lot of this. I remember in wrestling that there was a wrestler who used to be supposedly from the USSR. He was actually a Croatian, and I apologize for pronunciation, born and then moved to the United States wrestler, and his name was Nikolai Volkov, and he was always seen as a bad guy and the villain because he was from the USSR and stuff like that, foreign menace wrestler. And when this started happening with Ukraine, he actually, they made him basically a good guy, or what's known as a face in wrestling, and promoted this idea about Ukraine independence. And I remember that kind of hugely in my brain. It was a big deal for that, so that they were doing something like that. It was tacky in retrospect, but it was definitely there. In 1994, basically what happened at that point is Ukraine said, okay, we have like a lot of Russia's missiles. Maybe we should give those back. And they did. They sent those missiles back to Russia and became a non-nuclear power. Prior to that, they had, as far as physical possession, they had the third largest nuclear stockpile. So that's scary. So, but they sent it back. So that was done. And this was to kind of help keep Ukraine's sovereignty, because it's like, look, it's great, you want to be sovereign, but maybe not having nuclear weapons. So that's not a good idea. In 2004, there was a election that was overturned by protests in the streets because one of the candidates was initially poisoned and supposedly lost. However, and I am not going to pronounce these names and both of them were named Victor, so I'm like, and their last names are very similar, so I'm like, But basically, Yuri Nikshkiv, and I didn't, that is his name will come up again. He was how to put this? To put it bluntly, he was in the pocket of Russia. So, but he lost only after the recount, and the other candidate, the other Victor, was actually, they tried to poison him and tried to kill him. But that, whoever, it's not clear, but there's a lot of indications it was Russian operatives. In 2008, there was kind of a olive branch saying, hey, would you like to join NATO? And Russia's like, we don't want NATO that close to our borders. Ukraine is not. It was basically a buffer for Russia versus NATO, as well as Finland and Sweden are not part of NATO either. So those, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But they were both. That was a big deal of offering that to them, and it kind of like Russia's like, I don't think that's a good idea. So they just stopped for a little bit, and it was like they didn't really take it up. They were kind of trying to be neutral when it came to NATO, to be their own kind of country. So after that, there was an election in 2010. And Yanukovych, and I apologize, I am horrible with pronunciations. If you've listened to the show for any period of time, you know that names are bad for me. And I apologize. Ran and won in 2010 and started changing the political direction and becoming more Russian-oriented. You may have heard of Burisma, the oil company that Hunter Biden helped focus towards towards not being corrupt and in the pocket of Russia. This is also part of that as well. There was also political arrests going on, and basically what happened was that there was an uprising, and basically there was even like killings that happened, and this is Paul Manafort. His name comes up when it comes to these killings, something that you'll have to keep in mind and look up yourself. But it seems that he was a part of that situation and killing primarily civilians as this was going on. But eventually the Ukrainian individuals and the Ukrainian people went ahead and was able to reclaim the government for themselves. Shortly after that, Russia decides that it's going to seize Crimea, which is there's a lot of Russian individuals and a lot of Russian-speaking individuals and sympathetic individuals in Crimea and a couple other places, because they're basically cousins. They've, for how many years before the breakup of the Soviet Union, there was no real border, so people moved in and out and stuff like that. But there were still people that is not in the Donbas region or in Crimea that still spoke the Ukrainian language versus the Russian language. They probably, a lot of them probably knew both, but they primarily were speakers of Ukrainian versus the Russians. Crimea was a Russian-speaking area, primarily Russian-speaking. It's kind of like Texas, in a way, doesn't have its own language. But what I'm saying is like if Mexico decided to take Texas because there were a lot of Spanish-speaking individuals in Texas, then that's kind of the premise of the situation. Is that Russia's like, oh well, these are actually our people, and everything else. And in the meantime, there was also quietly troops and people being moved into those other areas that have since been claimed independent, quote unquote, by Russia, to kind of foment a rebellion against the Ukrainian government, and there's been a lot of Ukrainian deaths on both sides because they are Ukrainian, but there's been off and on hostilities in that area at the same time. So then in 2019, Zelensky was elected as the president of Ukraine. He was a former comedian. He defeated the incumbent, who was pro-Russian, and I mean, it was overwhelming. It was like over 70%. And they also took over the parliament as well. And Lewinsky's campaign promises included ending the war with Russia and rooting out corruption from the Ukrainian government. Now, if we'll go back to 2014 for just a second, during while all this was going on, one of the things that was prominent, and this is brought up as a gotcha moment, but it's not, because this is what actually this needed to happen, is basically the U.S. was going to promise more loan guarantees, but they had a corrupt prosecutor, state prosecutor. Basically, think of him as like an attorney general, sort of. And it was told by Biden that unless he goes, because part of the deal was to get rid of the corruption, that he would, and he was the biggest component of that they would not guarantee any more of the loans. So that was done, and it started kind of a chain reaction at that point of Ukrainians retaking over their government again from the pro-Russian sock puppets that had been infiltrating their government over time, because they were wanting to control the government and basically hand over Ukraine in a symbolic way to Russia, so that Russia could do whatever it wanted and is basically not have any of the sovereignty. And in 2021, with the crackdown of Russian Ukrainian oligarchs, and especially Viktor Melnitsky. Oh, that is so badly. That is not even close. There should not be that many consonants in a name. Anyways, I butchered that, but he was basically a close friend of Putin. Putin slowly, and this was in December, slowly started to build up forces in and around Russia, or in and around the Ukraine. And so at this point, Russia was, making gestures of invading. Now, we have to back up again between these 2 points. As we all know, the first impeachment for Trump was the phone call to Lewinsky. Lewinsky wanted more Stinger missiles and more, there's a specific kind of missile, but it's basically an anti-tank missile. That is, there are a couple of different kinds. I think it's the Stingers that are the less sophisticated. These are the ones that basically it's a point, you're eyeballing it, you point, you click, and you shoot, and you hope it hits the target. The others, and I can't remember the name of them, but basically they are targeted. They are both basically you get a laser pointer from the sky, and then this uses that information and then shoots the missile to hit the individual target. And so he had called Trump and it's like, hey, Trump, and then we're calling basically to congratulate, quote unquote, and it's like, hey, we would like to buy some more of these missiles. And Trump was like, yes, but I need you to do me a favor first. So it's basically asking for a quid pro quo. And this is where the, digging up the Biden information, supposedly in Ukraine and stuff like that. And this is where the fake Hunter Biden laptop, which there has been no evidence of a Hunter Biden laptop. No one has seen this laptop, not in the real. It's just been a few sheets of paper that Rudy Giuliani has printed off. So, it's kind of all of that, because basically, and the other thing is that one of Trump's big things was he was basically trying to weaken NATO. He was trying to shake it, trying to break it up. Germany was getting oil and natural gas from Russia, because that's what they do. That's Russia's biggest economy is their fuel and their all of this kind of stuff. So Russia is, if there's a strong NATO, it makes what's happening right now much difficult, which that's what's happening. It's made it much more difficult because NATO and the EU and everybody involved in those two organizations are much more unified after Trump was out of office. But Trump was trying to split them up, trying to break it up. You know, the whole, "Hey, they need to pay us" kind of thing. That's all part of it, was trying to show that the U.S. wasn't as into NATO as it used to be with Trump, and he was trying to crack the foundations, and he didn't succeed, as we can see now. But that was also playing into this as well, was all of that was going on. So then on the 21st, Russia recognizes the two breakaway regions as sovereign, basically unilaterally creating two new countries, supposedly. And I'm surprised he didn't do that with Crimea. Well, but seeing he was already controlled that, and it's probably why he didn't do that. But the other two were the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in the Ukraine, because again they're Russian speaking, have Russian sympathizers, and there has been fighting in both those regions, as I said, but since 2014 there's been a few troops coming over the border, you know, here and there, to train the Russian sympathized militia and everything else, and also to give them support as far as military, as far as gear and everything else. This is, you know, all been confirmed as far as that's concerned, and that he was just simply going to send in some peacekeepers, quote unquote. Again, this is, you know, and I'm not going to get too much into this as far as this, but when you listen to some, not all, but some of the Republican Party, it's really scary to listen to how they are portraying this, and how they are like, why should we be upset with Putin? You know, Putin's just trying to protect himself, blah, blah, blah. You know, Putin's a genius, as you've probably heard Trump say. And again, now, I don't have any direct knowledge, and this is all speculation and rumor, but, you know, there's a good bit of rumor that part of Donald Trump's debt for his buildings and properties is owned by by forces within the Russian oligarchy. Again, this is rumor and speculation. This is not fact. And I'm just reporting that rumor because this could possibly explain some of his actions and statements, especially recently. Is like, hey, you know, you need to help us here sound good on the international stage. Forgetting that Trump is not loved on the international stage, and most people takes what he said with a grain of salt. But any port in the storm when it comes to having the entire world against you. So that happened on the 21st of February. Then on the 24th, that's when the full-scale invasion happened, as far as everything's going. And that has been today is I am recording this as of March 1st at the middle of the night, because this is how I do things anyways. So when this happened, that was which was Thursday. So this is the 6th day of fighting in Ukraine. They have tried to press into Kyiv and keeps being repelled. I'm not going to get wholly into that, but so one of the things you need to keep in mind when you look at what's going on right now is a lot of individuals in Ukraine are either militia trained or getting was getting militia trained, or is currently being militia trained at time of recording, given weapons and taught how to do Molotov cocktails and urban warfare situations, which I don't think. First off, Putin thought this would be an easy hit to Kiev, and he would have already gotten rid of the government that's currently in power and started putting in his own sock puppets at this point. However, the Ukrainian people are much more resilient than he thought and much more courageous. I mean, just go on Twitter and look at any of the stuff that's currently going on. One of the things he did over the weekend, and this is what kind of went, made me want to do this, is that Putin bumped up his nuclear readiness or his standby-ness. So in America, there's this system called DEFCON. DEFCON 5 is the lowest, DEFCON 1 is the highest. DEFCON 1 is basically, we're about to let the missiles fly, hallelujah. Because that's it, we're done. Or very close to being done. We currently sit at DEFCON 4 because we're normally at DEFCON. It's very rare we're at DEFCON 5, but DEFCON 5 is basically, we're not really worried. The world seems to be fairly calm. Blah blah blah. DEFCON 4 is that there's some altercations that we need to keep an eye on, such as Russia, but there are a couple others, and so on, and it goes up from there as far as escalation is concerned, as far as our nuclear arsenal. So basically what Putin did is he put him on DEFCON 3, which means at that point, any pilots that fly bombers that hold nuclear weapons, stuff like that, basically they are ready to, at a moment's notice, get on a plane and start flying nuclear bombs, let them fall, hallelujah. Would it be full scale? Probably not. He would probably do strategic nuclear bombing, and I was like, what the fuck is strategic nuclear bombing? It is. It's like, well, that's fucking true. But it would basically be smaller. He wouldn't send out his full force. That's a lot of people are scared about that. We'll discuss it in half a second. Looking at his military leaders when he did that, they were like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Just their faces were like, "We don't think that's a good idea." But they're not going to say anything because this is Putin, and he is a dictator, and former KGB, and he basically, as we know, has black bagged quite a number of his opposition, or right out murdered, or tried to murder a good bit of his opposition. One of his biggest oppositions, and I cannot remember his name, I apologize, is basically sitting in a prison cell, rotting for the rest of his life. He is an opposition leader to Putin. And so, disloyalty would not be seen as encouraged. As we know, there's been a number of sanctions. I'm not going to get to them. These are not short-term fixes. These are things that take time to work. There's no short-term fix, except for going into war ourselves. And nobody thinks that's a good idea. I don't want this war, period. I don't want people dying in the streets. So, with that being said, I have a story. When I was in the 4th grade, I remember distinctly, and to this day, this memory stays in my head. But it was a group of us sitting there, and I remember my girlfriend, quote unquote, as much as a girlfriend for a fourth grader could be. You basically held hands and shared each other's lunches. As someone told me once about that. A little more, not kissing or anything like that, but, a little more sitting close to each other, arm around each other. I think she liked me just because of my warmth, and it was winter. When spring came, she left me, so I never been great with long-term relationships, but no, it's fourth grade, whatever. But we were all sitting around the cafeteria, and it was a group of us. And we were talking about, we're also, because you're in this was a tiny, poor town in the mountains of North Carolina in the south. And there were more churches in a square mile than there was convenience stores, or even, there wasn't even a grocery store. Closest grocery store was 15 miles away. So, there was like 2 convenience stores, but I can distinctly remember 5 churches around my house. So, of different denominations. So, we were all raised in the Christian doctrine. And we were talking about revelations in the end times, because that's what you do as a fourth grader. God knows you don't talk about, cartoons or whatever, because, we didn't have cable. We barely had TV, some of us. And to give you how poor it is, because this kind of all goes together. Denise, my girlfriend, had a Monday, Wednesday dress, a dress outfit, a Tuesday, Thursday dress, and then a Friday dress. That would sometimes be swapped out if there was something that happened. But for the most part, this was very common. Most of us had a couple of pairs of clothes. It wasn't discussed in the movie. I have not been able to watch the movie more than once, but I don't remember if it was been discussed in the movie. But in the book, Bridge over Terabithia, it talks about being poor in this kind of area, especially when it comes to clothes, and it always stuck with me because I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. I lived that shit. So I just, it was a Tuesday or Thursday because I remember the outfits very well. It's another one of the things that sticks in my mind. I don't remember anybody else that was with us. I think there was at least one other girl and maybe 2 girls or a guy. It's at least one other girl, but I don't remember who. But I remember Denise being there, and we're all sitting around talking about the end times and revelations and stuff like that. And I brought up the point. It's like, well, according to the text and everything else about fire in the sky and stuff, I believe the end times will come through nuclear holocaust. And we all sat for a second, and the others like, yeah, I can see that God using man and everything else to bring about the end of the world would be in line. I bring this up not to say, oh God, no. I bring this up because I and a lot of us, older generations, the Gen X's and the Boomers, have lived through this and have been through this, as far as the scares of being under the threat of nuclear holocaust for years. I was a military brat. There were so many things that I remember being taught, because I was on an army base, lived on an army base most of the time, and how scary it was to live on an army base and to be, there would be drills not only at school but on the base itself. Of course, everybody was notified of when it was going to happen so that they'd be mentally prepared that it is a drill, but you know exactly where to go and things like that. So I understand that crushing existential fear initially that is there. And this is the crux of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Because I feel those of my audience that millennials or Gen Z, anybody who's listening who's younger, who was born after, even after 85, has no knowledge of this, has no recollection of this. Those who were born before 80 would have at least a hint of the idea, though, those born in the early 70s and before that have a more distinct thing, because this was one of Reagan's pushes, was trying to stop the USSR and trying to end communism, and but trying to, the USSR was our biggest enemy, everything like that. So it sticks out to you. It's one of those things that you just kind of remember. That being said, I want to offer some hope. I know it's scary. I know the saber rattling didn't help any. I can't make any promises that tomorrow we'll wake up and everything will be okay. What I can say is that, first off, it's okay to be overwhelmed. I've said this multiple times on my social media, and I'm going to say it again. It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to be so overwhelmed that all you can do to feed yourself is to eat, Chef Boyardee or SpaghettiOs or whatever straight out of the can. As long as you're eating something, and something with protein, drinking water, and also I would invest in vitamins. It helps, because I understand about being overwhelmed, and being able to take your meds, including a vitamin, a good multivitamin or a good set of vitamins, is not a bad idea when you're having these kind of days where you barely can function. And I know we are just coming out of COVID, and this is like, what? Something fucking else. And I get it. It's just been one shit thing after another for the past 2.5 years. I understand, and I am so sorry. I get it too. I'm exhausted. I've been up late at night, like today, watching and doom scrolling. And I can't give you advice to stop it. I should, to step away, to walk away from it for a few hours. But it's so hard, and I get that. When you want to know. And again, I can also say that, we won't know everything, because we won't know everything for years. But we, as a society, especially now with the internet and social media and everything, crave information constantly. And so I understand. I do. And I'm sorry. Again, this is not something that we can control. We'll get the information we get. I am offering that tomorrow there is a tomorrow. I'm offering hope. I have no guarantees. This is where my faith comes in, but I offer hope. I offer hope that, for example, if Putin loses his ever-fucking mind and decides that he wants to obliterate the planet because he can't have what he wants, that cooler heads that may be terrified right now are going to be like, you know what? I'm not ready to die. At least not like this. And won't let it happen. I'm fairly confident in that. But again, I make no guarantees. I can't. I hope that tomorrow when we wake up, there'll be a new dawn and a new day. And that we keep on trying. And we keep on trying to be better people. And we keep helping each other the best we can. I offer hope to Ukraine that there will be peace very soon. That the bloodshed and the pain and the agony that is currently going on will end quickly. And that the individuals can rebuild their lives and be whole. I'm not offering the prayer that we discussed in our last show, the war prayer. I'm not offering that. I'm offering peace, not victory. I would prefer peace, because that, I believe, should be what we all seek. I am offering protection, and I'm offering prayers of protection for the Ukrainian people, and prayers that they can hold their ground. I don't want Russia decimated. I don't want the Russian people decimated. I don't want the Russian soldiers decimated. I just want the Russian soldiers to go back home and there be peace. I know it's a bit idealistic. I also believe that you have to be realistic a little bit, and if there has to be a defense, and if there has to be a fight, I pray that the Ukrainians can stand up to the Russians. Though the Russians have more hardware, have more weapons, and have everything else, I pray that they can stand up and they can fight and they can push back and keep their country and keep their freedoms and keep their sovereignty. I hope that each day things get better. They aren't right now, and I understand. You can do your part. Go to the Red Cross, give blood. There are good places to donate that are safe places. Don't donate to individuals that on TikTok or anything like that. These may be good people. They may not. You don't know. If they're needing help, there are international organizations that can get in there and have gotten in there and are still, and are offering relief and whatever. And that's what they need, is your support that way. That, if you feel you need to do something, if you can, turn this shit off. We have that capability, and we have we have that choice. And I know the Ukrainian people don't. So I get that. I get that that feels guilty. But you can't help in any way if you're so immobile you can't do anything. Drink water. Eat what you can. Do what you can to get some rest. Escape when you can. For your mental health. Because you are precious. And this can be so overwhelming. With everything else that we've been through. The last thing we needed was this. But we don't get choices with what happens. To quote Frodo and Gandalf, it's like, I wished what am I supposed to do? I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, and I apologize to Tolkien. It's like, this is, I wished I lived in a different time. And Gandalf says it's like, what we can do is with the time that we have been given. The other thing, and this is more towards Russia in general, if anybody from Russia is listening, another exchange from Frodo and Gandalf is like, Bilbo should have killed him. It's like, Gandalf's like, should have, possibly, but he deserved death. And Gandalf's like, deserved death, possible, there's a lot of people that deserve death. There's also a lot of people that deserve life. Don't be too willing to dole out death if you can't give life. There are a lot of people in Russia right now that's going to suffer a lot with these sanctions that has come down. And there's a lot of Russian people that are suffering right now because they've stood up to the government. And they have said, no, we don't want this war. And have been thrown in jail. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of suffering. And keep them in your hearts and prayers and however you do this. I don't have a closer. Not really. I thought about doing a prayer, but that would seem chintzy and not what we do here. Find those organizations to donate. Help out that way. Maybe help out in a local way to yourselves. Don't be cruel to the Russians who live here. They live here and they may not want this at all, or they may want it. But no one deserves your vitriol. Vitriol. And I can't stress that enough. Be kind to even the Russians who live in this country. Oh, you can be mad at, Trump and all the people who carry Russia's water, because there are public leaders, and they're supposed to be standing in unison with the United States and our allies against Russia. But as far as the individuals, the Russian, especially the Russian businesses or just Russians, they probably don't want this either. So don't be mean to them. Support them, help them out. Also help out, any Ukrainian-owned businesses. Buy whatever you can from Ukrainian-owned businesses. Help them out as well. So, with that being said, new show will come up on Thursday, and it will be about the State of the Union. We'll go over that and everything else. And in the meantime, I thank you for joining us here at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney. You can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and podcast, as well as our website. Just Google us. Don't forget our Patreon page, where $2 a month keeps the show going, and also is how I feed myself right now. And you can also find my partner, September, on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12. That's NINEOF12. You can also hear her on the Geek Growth podcast, as well as her competition at the next top podcaster. And I want to thank you for listening today, and bless your hearts.